of John Baker and his approach to care of his dogs and his team. But we're proud of the canine athletes. He has a couple lead dogs, Velvet and Snicker, that are pretty incredible.
My friend would yield.
Certainly.
I've got a call from one of the secretaries. Why don't you give your statement? Because I would be interested in it.
Well, I will share it with you because it is a great story, and I appreciate the indulgence. Thank you, Leader. I again speak on behalf of not only John Baker as a great athlete, but his canine athletes. When the mushers leave out of the start in Willow, they leave with about 16 dogs on the team. And these are remarkable animals who love nothing more than to be on the trail and to be mushing. And his team demonstrated a resolve and a commitment and just a dedication to not only their musher, Mr. Baker, but just to what the whole sport of dog mushing is all about. For those who follow the Iditarod Trail, you know this is not for the weak. This is over exceptionally rugged terrain, oftentimes in exceptionally rugged circumstances where you have Arctic winds howling down off of the coast, blizzards that provide for whiteouts, going down passes that cause encounters that flip you over and break sleds and break bones. It is not for the timid. But Alaska brings out some exceptional individuals. There were 62 teams that mushed from Willow to Nome this year, and they are still out there on the trail as we speak. We wish those that are still coming in, we wish them well along the way. We had some accidents, but there's never an Iditarod that we don't seem to have Mother Nature intervening in one way or another. The good news for us is that those that have had happenstances, whether it was a broken collarbone or a happenstance with a knife, those men are doing fine, and the dogs, again, are coming in and doing fine. Again,
Madam President, would my friend yield for a question?
Yes, Majority Leader.
They had a great piece on public radio before the race started. It was really very, very good about why the race takes place. And I wanted to find out if what I understood with that radio piece is valid. Wherever the race winds up was a place they were in badly need of some kind of a serum because there was an illness there, diphtheria or whatever it was, I don't really remember. And they had no way of getting the medicine there. And some person decided what they could do. What they could do without machines, they could do with dogs. And that they took the medicine there and saved all these lives. Is that valid?
You watched that report well, and
well, I listened to it. It was on the radio.
You listened to it well, and you heard it right. It was an outbreak of diphtheria in Nome, and there was no way to get the diphtheria serum to the residents of Nome. It was a true and honest scare in the middle of the winter, and the concern was that if they were to take it through a regular route during the winter months, it would not get there in time to save the residents of Nome. The airfields were not sufficient. They could not travel by air because we didn't have the airfields back in the 20s. And so it was a team of dogs that did a relay across the state. And they delivered the serum in time, saved the town, and this race has been resurrected, if you will, to commemorate the last great race to Nome, is what it's called, but to commemorate the delivery of the serum to act as as what would save that community. It's quite a remarkable story in our state's history.
Madam President, I hesitate saying this, so I'll probably get in trouble, but this is a good reason why the House vote was bad today to disband public radio. Because it was such a wonderful piece. I didn't know that. So.
Well, and I, too, will take an opportunity to plug public radio because you heard the piece on NPR, but in my home state and in many of the villages that we're talking about where these teams will go through on their way to Nome, it truly is the public broadcast system that is their means of communication.
I've heard Ted Stevens talk about this in the past.
Mukluk radio is what, Mukluk telegraph is what we would call it. And it was a way to convey birthday greetings to people in the next village. It was a way to say, I made it back from hunting camp safely. It's a way of communication. People don't often recognize that in many parts of our state, and certainly along parts of where these teams are traveling right now, we don't have a level of communication that we see here in Washington, D.C. or in most parts of the country. So that's our plug for public radio. I appreciate that bid.
The only radio station I can get in the daytime in Searchlight is public radio.
There you have it. Madam President, I appreciate the indulgence of the Majority Leader, and again, I send my warmest well wishes to John Baker and his team. I will be greeting the mushers in Nome on Sunday at the Mushers Banquet, and I just can't wait. So I thank you for the time that you've given me, and I yield the floor.
The Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session to consider account number 48. That the nomination be confirmed, the motion be considered made and laid on the table, with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to the nomination, that any statements related to the nomination be printed in the record. President Obama be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask consent that on Monday, March 28th at 4:30 p.m., the Senate proceed to executive session to consider account number 40. There be 1 hour for debate equally divided in the usual form, that upon the use or reading back of that time, Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on count number 40. The motion be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order, that any related statements be printed in the record, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Foreign Relations Committee be discharged from further consideration of S.Res. 51, and the Senate now proceed to that matter.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 51, recognizing the 190th anniversary of the independence of Greece and celebrating Greek and American democracy.
Without objection, the committee is discharged, and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion we consider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask that we proceed to S.Res. 105.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 105, to condemn the December 19, 2010 elections in Belarus and to call for the immediate release of all political prisoners and for new elections that meet international standards.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Madam President, I now ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate, and any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record as if given.
Without objection.
I now ask that we proceed to S.Res. 106.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 106, recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire in New York City on March 25, 1911, and so forth.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask that we proceed to S.Res. 107.
The clerk will report.
S. 107, designating April 4th, 2011 as National Association of Junior Auxiliaries Day.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table.
Without objection.
I now ask, Madam President, unanimous consent that we proceed to H. Conres 30.
The clerk will report.
H. Conres 30, providing for a conditional adjournment of the House of Representatives and a conditional recess or adjournment of the Senate.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record as if given.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that during the adjournment of the Senate, the Majority Leader, Senator Rockefeller, and Senator Webb be authorized to sign duly enrolled bills or resolutions.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming recess or adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro tempore of the Senate, the Majority and Minority Leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conference authorized by law by concurrent action of the two houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, adjourn under the provisions H. Conres 30 until 2 p.m. on March 28th, which is a Monday. Following the prayer and the pledge, the journal proceedings be approved to date. Morning hour be deemed expired. The time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. And following any leader remarks, there will be a period of morning business till 3 p.m. The Senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. Following morning business, the Senate resumed consideration of S. 493, Small Business Jobs Bill. Finally, I ask at 4:30 p.m. the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of May DiAgostino, the United States District Judge for the Northern District of New York, as provided under a previous order.
Without objection.
So, Madam President, 5:30 on the Monday that we return, there will be a vote on the confirmation of DiAgostino. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned under the provisions of H. Conres 30 until 2 p.m. on Monday, March 28th.
By a vote of 87 to 13, the Senate today approved a continuing resolution